with contracts. Well, all right. So this is officially the recording starting, and we're going to go over contracts first. So here's what I will say. You ready? First thing that we need to do is we need to identify what the legal essential elements of any contract are. Okay? So let's see. What is any essential element of a legal contract? So what would that be? Okay. So we have the acronym I like to use is CLOCK, okay, which is, and here's how I remember, and this is how I remember it. I remember it CLOCK without a K. We have capable parties. We have lawful object. We have offer and acceptance. And we have consideration. So let's talk about that, okay? So when I say capable parties, okay, sometimes you'll hear an instructor say competent parties, right? You'll hear them say you have to have competent parties. Basically, what that means is this: the parties to the contract cannot be declared legally incompetent. So if a court of law ever deems someone to be incompetent, meaning they could never give consent, okay, then they wouldn't be able to ever consent to any kind of contract. They would never be able to bind themselves to a contract. So when we say capable parties, that's what we're referring to there. We're referring to the fact that you can't have a legal contract, a legal valid contract without capable parties. Okay? So the next one is lawful object. And what do I mean by lawful object? I mean that the object of the contract or a component to the object of the contract has to be all lawful. They all have to be lawful. Okay? So if I said, hey, I want to enter into a contract with you to sell 5 pounds of heroin for me. Well, that's illegal. That's illegal. We can't do that. Okay? That's no good. All right? Now, the next thing would be if I were to purchase your home with 5 pounds of heroin, that would also be illegal, right? So what happens is both of those would have to be, it has to be a lawful object, meaning that the reason for you entering into the contract has to be lawful, okay? And then the all components of the contract need to be lawful, right? And also too, if you guys have any questions as I'm going along, those of you who are live with me in the chat, feel free to comment, ask any kind of questions, because again, I'm here for you guys. And anyone who's watching on recording, if you do want to participate live in any future webinars, we do have links to our Facebook group in the description, and you would be able to get that information. You'd be able to check our latest events in our Facebook group. We update you live and regularly as far as when our next webinars are. So the next thing that I want to say is offer and acceptance. What do I mean by offer and acceptance? What do I mean by that? Agreement. Yeah, basically that we're all on the same page, right? Because a lot of times we have contracts and we got to be on the same page as far as everything is concerned. We have to make sure that we agree. They sometimes also refer to an offer and acceptance as a meeting of the minds, meaning that all parties have basically sat there and said, yeah, we agree to this. This is awesome. Fantastic, right? So that's pretty easy. The next one, consideration. So consideration could be one of two things. It could be good or valuable. Give me an example of good consideration. Can anyone give me an example in the chat right now as far as good consideration is concerned? What is good consideration? What does that mean? Let's see. Anybody in the chat? Checking on everybody, checking the pulse of everybody. So good consideration is this. I'll take the reins. I'll tell you what it is. Good consideration is basically something like love and affection, okay? Love, affection, stuff like that. That would be good consideration. Valuable consideration would be anything of value. So it could be money. It could be something along the lines of, what was I going to say? Like something valuable, okay? Someone said a chicken back in the day. Kayla, that's a great one. Yeah. So you're thinking of actually like dowry, like ancient times. Like they used to have dower and curtsy, and some states have dower and curtsy laws still intact, things like that. But I won't get into that because that's state specific. But that's what they used to call it. That was a dowry, where they would have like a chicken or something like that, or something binding you to it. Yeah, I'll give you a goat or a sheep. Those things. Yeah. So valuable consideration is anything that you would hold of value, right? So that is all of the legal, all the things that would make up a valid contract, a valid enforceable contract. Now, our contracts could be a couple of things. They could be either express or implied. Okay. They could also be bilateral or unilateral. And they could also be executory or executed. So what's the difference between an express and implied contract? Let's start there. As I take a quick sip of water. Written? So Kayla, you're saying one is written and one is dictated by the actions, is understood through the actions. So what I will tell you is this, okay? Express may be oral or written. Yeah, absolutely. So an express contract can be oral or written, and an implied contract is understood through actions. So let me give you my examples of an implied contract versus an express contract. If I sit down to a restaurant, okay, and I say, I'd like the filet mignon, medium rare, please, good sir, okay? They understand that through my actions, I'm going to probably pay for my meal, eat my meal, okay, and be on my merry way, right? It is implied that they're going to cook me a meal, right, Kayla? It's implied that they're going to cook me a meal. I'm going to be served said meal, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to love it, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to go on and pay and be on my merry way. Okay, so that is an implied contract, right? And also, too, I'm kind of getting off implied contracts for a little bit. There could be implied agency as well. So watch this. You could have an agency relationship with someone that is said to be implied. So when would that happen? When would we enter into a contract, an agency relationship with someone that is implied? So let me give you an example. I'm in an open house, right? I'm at an open house, and some people come to the open house, and they've never met me before. And now, at no point do they say, Stu, we would like you to represent us. We'd like you to be our buyer's agent. You just seem really cool. You seem like a nice guy, and you seem knowledgeable. And I'm like, thank you so much. It's probably my bald head. So what happens is this. They then ask me, instead of saying that and coming out and saying, hey, Stu, we want you to be our agent, okay, what they would do is this. They would say something along the lines of, hey, Stu, could you take us to go see that property down the street after the open house? And this happens a lot more than you would think, where someone just comes in and is like, especially now in a lot of markets, it's a hot market. So it's like, hey, there's a realtor here. We could get him to show us a home that we have been dying to see. Maybe he could show it to us after the, open house, and that would create an implied agency relationship. That would create a relationship between you and the buyer because of your actions, because you're sitting there going, okay, yes, I will take you to the open house. I will do that. So now I think we understand a express contract, an implied contract pretty well. So let me ask you this. What about an express contract? Give it to me in simple terms. And here's what I'm going to tell you with express contracts. When it comes to express contracts, they can be oral or written, all right? And what happens is this: I want you to understand a very easy, very basic definition of everything. So like all the stuff that we're going over tonight, realize this, that I have this I have this off the top of my head. Like I'm just basically winging it. I'm just sitting here because you guys gave me the outline for tonight, what you wanted to go over, and I am gladly obliging with a couple things that I thought would be good for us to go over too, added and sprinkled in there. Okay, so a listing agreement or exclusive listing can be expressed. So both of them are going to be expressed. And let me tell you what expressed means. And again, you want to keep a very simple, concise definition. And this is for everything. An express contract is explicitly and clearly defined and outlined. Okay, it's clearly defined and outlined. We know what it's supposed to be just simply based off of what we've agreed to. Okay, so what happens is this. Let me show you. Me ordering a filet mignon at a restaurant is implied through my actions. I go to the restaurant, I say a filet mignon, medium rare, please, good kind sir, and it is served to me. Voila, like magic. An express contract would be, let's say I wanted to sell you one of my guitars, right? I wanted to sell you one of my guitars. And you said, how much is that guitar, Stu? And I said, the guitar is $300, okay? The guitar is $300. And you say, sold, I want to take your guitar for $300, Stu. Then guess what? Then you have an understanding that we have an express contract. Doesn't need to be in writing to be expressed, but you understand that we have an exchange. We have an agreed upon price, and you said exactly what you want to have there as far as what the compensation is going to be. So we're all good to go there. It's all, the terms are clearly laid out, okay? Now, here's the thing. There are certain things that you're just going to never have an implied contract in. Like, for example, you'll never have an implied real estate contract, right? Because you don't really go up to a seller, see the for sale sign, okay, get out of your car and, wink at the seller through the window, and then they wink back at you, and all of a sudden you're buying their house, okay? It doesn't work like that. There's no actions that you could take that would understand that the next step is going to be you're in contract with them, right? As opposed to me sitting down at a restaurant ordering something, okay? Or me going to a retail location and bringing said item up to the counter. I go to Target, and I always say when I go to Target, what does everyone say when they go to Target? I just need a couple things, $300 later, oh dear God, how did we get here? But I bring all my $300 worth of stuff up to the register, and what happens is they understand exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to pay for all this stuff, and I'm going to walk out of the store, okay? That is an implied contract as well. It's understood through the actions of me bringing that stuff up to the counter, okay? Saying, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. So do you guys understand that? Okay. Is that clear for you guys? And let me know in the chat. Just give me a couple smiles, a couple thumbs up as I took a sip. Yeah, so I like to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like having, and here's the thing, I don't want to ask you guys to type too much stuff in unless you guys have questions, but I like to make sure that you guys are here with me because, again, I want to make sure that I'm not leaving any of you in the dust. That's why I try to make sure that we answer all the questions from the people who are live with us in the chat. So next one that I want to say is this. What is the difference between a bilateral and a unilateral contract? Bilateral and unilateral. People always get this confused too. Bilateral and unilateral. Yeah. So Kayla said, and this is a common one. I like that, Kayla, I like that you gave this answer because here's what happens. A lot of people think this. You said bi is two people, this is plus two people, is like more than, two or more. Uni is one. So here's what it is. A unilateral and a bilateral contract are similar to one another in certain ways. Okay. A bilateral contract is where there are two parties. Okay. And what happens is, or more than two parties, depending on what kind of contract it is. I could see there could be three parties to a contract. Okay. And what happens is it's a promise in exchange for a promise. Okay. So it's when, like the example of the guitar, right? The guitar is basically me selling you my guitar, you giving me money. Okay. That's a bilateral contract, promise in exchange for a promise. Okay. When I go order a steak at a restaurant, okay, that is said to be an implied bilateral contract, okay? Promise in exchange for a promise. You cook me a delicious steak, I eat said delicious steak, and I get to pay for that delicious steak afterwards, all right? So that's the situation there. A bilateral contract is a promise in exchange for a promise, okay? Now, a unilateral contract is one in which it is binding to only one party. It is binding to the option or, okay, the option or, which means, okay, which means this, okay, the option or gives and the EE receives. Option or says to the optionee, I will let you purchase my home. You have the option to purchase my home. You could choose to purchase it or not. It's totally up to you. Okay. That is an example of a unilateral contract binding to one party. Also, famously, an open listing is an example of a unilateral contract, right? Whatever broker brings the buyer first wins. Okay. That's the situation there. Okay. Whoever brings the buyer first wins. Now, also, it could take place with an option to purchase, okay? I'm giving you the option to purchase my property. If you choose to do it, then what happens is we say that's exercising. So if you exercise your option, that means that you're basically saying, okay, yes, I want to bind you to this option. I want to go forward with it. I want to turn it into a bilateral contract. And that's what happens. When you exercise an option, it typically turns it into a bilateral agreement. Does that make sense, everybody? Like I said, type in the chat. Just give me a thumbs up. So someone said, isn't that technically still a promise for a promise? No, because here's the thing. I'm giving you a situation. So remember I said to you, and listen to what I said with my words. You ready? I said that the option contract, okay, the option contract is a unilateral contract. Meaning, if I said to you, I'm giving you the option to purchase my property, okay? I'm giving you the option to purchase my property. Okay, Hannah, I'm giving you the option to purchase my property. You have a choice. That option is unilateral, binding to only me, right? So you could choose to exercise it, okay? And when you do exercise it, then I'm selling you my house and you're buying my house. Then it's a bilateral contract. So does that make sense? The option portion of it is unilateral, but it always, here's the thing, the option always turns into some sort of bilateral agreement, okay? Because when it's exercised, then it becomes binding in some manner, shape, or form, okay? So that's the situation there in regards to that. So let's go to executory and executed. So what's an executory contract? What is an executory contract? Executory still needs to be completed, okay? Executed is done, over with, finito, okay? Yes. They sometimes refer to executed contracts as those of being a discharge, that the contract is discharged, all right? Now, we have to talk about everyone's favorite definitions: void, voidable, unenforceable, and enforceable. Okay? Kayla said yes. So when you talked about contracts, you're like, this is what we want. Okay. So let's start with the easiest one. I always go from easiest to hardest. Okay. Easiest, an enforceable contract meets all the legal binding. It meets the capable parties' lawful object, offer and consideration, offer and acceptance and consideration. Okay, meets all of them. Enforceable, good to go. Okay. The next easiest one I think to remember is void. A contract is said to be void when it does not meet the legality of the object. Okay. Meaning, and here's the thing, let me tell you what happens. A lot of you say that when you have one of the items missing, okay, one of the items missing, that you have a void contract. You never had a contract. You never have a contract unless you have all those items. So, Kayla, tell me where I lost you in regards to that, because I saw the come up. Tell me where I lost you. So, a void contract. So, let me tell you what it is. A void contract is when the legality of the object is not met. Void is when the legality of the object is not met. A contract to sell heroin, void. Okay? It could meet all the legal objects, capable parties, offer and acceptance, consideration. So, 16-year-old sells a house. Is that void? Depends on the state you're in. It depends on the question. Okay? It could be, it's most likely going to be voidable, okay, on the part of the minor. So as long as it is lawful and legal, okay, there are certain states that it is illegal to enter into any contract with a minor, so it will be void because the legality of the object isn't there, okay? So as I was saying with void, and I'm going to finish up my thought process there. If it's an illegal purpose, okay, if it's an illegal purpose, meaning it's, like I said, a contract to sell heroin, or it's a legal object, meaning, let's say it's a contract to purchase your home, okay? Let's say, Kayla, it is a contract to purchase your home, okay? And then we say it's a contract to purchase the home, but the consideration is 5 pounds of heroin. That would be a void contract. Can never be acted on, can never be completed, can never be executed. So Kayla asked a question: if someone is in a contract and both parties agree to cancel the contract, what would the contract be? It would be rescinded, revoked, canceled. Okay, that's what it would be. I mean, anything like that. It's not that what was I going to say? It's not that I'm going to say that it's void, because what happens is void means that the contract can never take flight, right? It's that you can never act on a void contract, even if you wanted to. So a contract that was said to be canceled, rescinded, stuff like that. Can I give an example of what? You have to give me, tell me what you want an example of, and I will give you an example of it, because we're getting into the more complicated stuff here with the contract. So that's why I want to make sure that you understand it, and then I'm clearing up anything for you guys who are here live in the chat. Of avoidable contract, well, I was getting to voidable. I was wrapping up void. Avoidable contract is a contract in which someone is under duress, or it is with a minor, okay? Contracts with minors, people who are under duress, people who are inebriated in some manner, shape, or form, so they're intoxicated, things like that. That would be a voidable contract. Now, all other things have to be met, okay? So if you have a contract that is to sell 5 pounds of heroin, okay? You have a contract that's to sell 5 pounds of heroin, and then what happens is this. You also have someone who is under duress, and duress means that someone's like coerced into doing something. Like maybe they have a gun against their head and it's like, sign that contract, okay? Bottom line is it would be a void contract because the legality of the object isn't met. A voidable contract is legal, could be executed, okay? There's nothing that says that it can't be executed or acted upon. However, one of the parties could disaffirm or void the contract because they were under duress, they were a minor at the time that they signed the contract, something like that. Okay. So does that make sense? Did that clear it up for you? Okay. So voidable is what I would say is the second most difficult. Okay. So great question. If a 17-year-old and his wife buy a house, void or voidable? Valid, enforceable. 100% not voidable, because as soon as you're married, you're emancipated. You are no longer a minor. Okay. If you are a married individual in every state, you are an emancipated minor, and you are going to be, you're going to be. So if they ask you that on the test, I know that that's a popular test question. And the whole trick is the 17-year-old being married is an adult. So if there's nothing else in that scenario that leads you to believe that there is a reason why it could be void, okay, or voidable, just based on the fact that he's 17, not enough. Because here's the thing. Remember I said to you, I said minors are voidable. He is not viewed as a minor if he has a wife. Okay, 17-year-old and his wife, boom, he's an adult. He's an adult. Okay, you get married, you are an adult in every state. Okay, in every state. So if you're illegal, if you're of the age that you could get married, you're an emancipated minor. You are an adult. So the most difficult one is unenforceable. And there's really not many examples of it. That's why unenforceable is a hard one to kind of explain. Okay. Yes, unenforceable means won't stand in court, but it doesn't meet. So Lynn asked a great question. Two parties verbally agree to buy, sell a house. Is it enforceable? Nope, it's unenforceable. You can. So here's the thing. That is the classic example, because there's a law that is called the Statute of Frauds, and I'm going to write that over here. Okay. The Statute of Frauds, says that in order for a property to be, in order for a contract to be enforceable in a court system, certain ones have to be in writing. Any lease over a year, so any lease over a year, and any sale of real estate. So if you're agreeing to buy or sell real estate, it must be in writing to be enforceable. If it is not in writing, it is said to be unenforceable. What does that mean? You can go forward with it. There is nothing illegal about it. Okay, as long as it is a legal contract, it is a legal agreement, and it's not, and no one was put under duress. No one is a minor. Okay, so if it meets the muster of everything else, the courts won't stop you, but they won't be able to enforce it either. They won't be able to get involved and say, oh, you need to, like, if I said I'm the buyer, and I'm like, I want to sue you for specific performance to sell the home because you said you would. Nope. The court cannot be involved in it. Does that make sense? Let me know in the chat if that helped you out at all. Yeah, that's the hardest one to understand. It's because it meets the muster of everything else. It's just the courts can't get involved in it. And here's the thing. They'll ask you, is an oral contract for the sale of, heroin, is that an unenforceable or void contract? Well, it's void because it's for an illegal purpose. The bottom line is, no matter what, you have to figure out what it is that is. So Hannah said, what was the answer to the 17-year-old and his wife buying a house? That answer was, as long as they are married, he is considered to be an emancipated minor, so he's considered to be an adult. So it's not voidable. It is totally, absolutely valid, enforceable, totally cool, totally kosher. Okay. So guys, that is contracts right now. That is contracts. And I spent a lot of time on that one because I think that's a really important one. And I think a lot of us get a lot of questions wrong because there's a lot of stuff in that section. So I'm going to cross it off. Do you guys have any other questions for me as regards to contracts? Okay, speak now or forever hold your peace. Let's see. Nothing. Fair housing. Super big section on your test. Okay, super big, major section. Okay, you will have a lot of questions about fair housing. I'm talking easily 5 to 6 questions, no doubt, no doubt. And here's the thing: the questions that they ask you on the test are very much so going to be questions that are super scenario based. And we'll go into what some of them might look like for you on the test. So let's just answer a couple things, okay? Can they just ask the year? No, no. It would be, listen, it would be so much easier. Kayla asked that. That would be so much easier if they just said, "Hey, what law is this?" They don't. They want to make sure that you understand it in regards to being able to identify it in a scenario. The Civil Rights Act of 1866. What does that cover? What does that cover? Race. Yeah, depending on what textbook you have, they might say color as well. Okay, but usually they just say race. Then the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Okay, what did that cover? So that was race, color, religion, national origin. Okay, race, color, religion, national origin, and ancestry. I put that in there. I put that in there. Okay, because ancestry, national origin, kind of same, stuff like that. Some books like to write ancestry out. Now there were two amendments. There was 74. What did they add? What did they add in 74? They added gender in 74, gender or sex. And when we say gender or sex, we're talking about male, female. Okay. And in 88, what did they add? What did they add in 88 as far as a protected class? What did they add? They added mental and physical handicaps. They included AIDS victims. Um, and I'll get to that in a second. Okay. And familial status. Okay. So the AIDS victim thing is basically a product of the time. We're coming off of the AIDS epidemic, right? Of the 80s, coming off of the AIDS epidemic. So they said, hey, we have to explicitly include AIDS victims as a physical handicap. Okay. Nowadays in 2020, that seems like odd. But like I said, if you put the time context into it, right? If you put the context of the time into it, what happens is this: AIDS victims make sense. Doesn't that, now that you think about it? Because think about it, you have gender and sex kind of come with a lot of civil rights movements of the time. Okay. And then 88 mental and physical handicaps, including AIDS victims and familial status. So let me ask you this question. An alcoholic in treatment, are they considered to be a protected class? Oh man, you guys are smarty pants. You guys are answering real quick. Ebony, Kayla, you both said yes. I got no contradicting ones. So yeah, alcoholics in treatment are considered to be a protected class. Yes, 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 yes. What about a drug abuser in treatment? Okay, illegal substance abuser. Okay. They are considered to not be a protected class because they are abusing an illegal substance. Yep, that is the answer to that. They are considered to be using an illegal substance, so it is considered to be criminal. Alcohol is legal, okay? And I'm giving you, listen to what I'm going to tell you, okay? You ready? Because there's basically yeah, I know that that's a popular question on the test too. That's why I like to answer that. What happens is this: there's test question answers, and then there is real world stuff. Okay, So real world stuff, that's more of a gray area, especially now with a lot of laws changing, going state by state, and drug abuse, depending on what kind of drug it is, what kind of illegal substance it is. There's a lot of things that are kind of up in the air, quasi like, I don't know if that would be considered, not considered, stuff like that. Okay. So what happens is this right now for your test, the way that I would answer it, because you have to understand this, the test questions, okay, were written 2 to 3 years ago, okay, because it takes a little bit of a process for the questions to get in there. So anything that's like happening now, like that's occurring now, probably it's going to take 2 to 3 years for those questions to actually show up on the test, for it to reflect in a test question. So unless you're taking this test 2 to 3 years from when I'm recording this, bottom line is this: it's not something that I would really concern yourself with anything outside of what I'm telling you right now, as far as what is good, you know, what is going to be the answer as far as that's concerned. So that being said, okay, that being said, the situation is this: can a private club, I'm going to ask you a couple questions, can a private club discriminate based on membership to their club? Say, hey, we only rent to club members, okay, we only we only what was I going to say? We only rent to club members. Is that good, bad, and different? Yes, I think they have the right to charge membership. Okay. So here's what it is. And Ebony is on a really good path. As long as membership to the club isn't based on, it doesn't exclude a protected class, okay? Doesn't exclude a protected class, then they could discriminate based on belonging to the club. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. You ready? My wife and I belong to the Cornell Club, okay, as in Cornell University. No, I did not go to Cornell University. My wife did. So what happens is they have special rooms, suites, and things like that in New York City that we, as Cornell Club members, we take advantage of. We go to the city and we rent out a room at the Cornell Club. Very exclusive, very nice. It's only open to Cornell Club members. I have access to business suites there, and they don't care, flying hootenanny, as long as you could pay the dues. As long as you could pay the dues and you were a Cornell alumni, they're fine. They don't care. You could be white, black, you could be purple. They don't care. They don't care. You could be Jewish, Catholic, atheist. They don't care. They don't care what it is. Okay. So they do not discriminate based on anything for their membership, and they could discriminate for the fact that you're a member of the club or not a member of the club. Now, let's talk about our illegal practices. We have steering, we have redlining, and we have blockbusting. So what's steering? What is steering? What is steering, guys? So, yeah, so steering is this. Okay, steering is when you have a situation where you're basically guiding, channeling, directing buyers to a certain area. Okay. So okay, listen, I can't spell. That's all right. I can never spell. There's so many spelling errors in my stuff. Don't worry about it. If you're typing in the chat and you feel like you can't spell, it's all right. It's late at night. So what I will tell you is this: steering is channeling a buyer to or away from a certain area, right? So you're channeling them to or away from a certain area, okay? So that is the situation with what it is, all right? It's channeling people to or away from a certain area if they belong to a certain protected class, okay? Now, what is redlining? Okay, what is redlining? What is redlining? So is it just the refusal to lend in certain geographic areas? Okay. Is it is it just lending? Might be more than just lending. Okay. People always get the lending part of redlining, but it's also no, because Kayla, showing houses would be steering, right? Showing houses would be steering. So redlining, okay, redlining is when you're lending or refusing lending or insurance, okay, lending or insurance to people in certain geographic areas. We will not lend or insure in that area, okay. And usually, what happened was it also came with we will not lend or insure to people of a certain race in a certain area. Like that was like a big one back before the civil rights movements. Okay, it was basically refused to lend or insure to African Americans in certain areas. That was a big one. Like, here's the thing: redlining was done at a time, but right now it's no longer practiced. It's no longer legal. Okay. But there was a time in our country's history where that was a practice, that was done, that was something that happened. So that is the situation there with what redlining is. It's refusing to lend or insure, okay, in certain areas. And like I said, it was typically, they would say, we will not lend or insure to someone of this of this class in this area. And sometimes it was just flat out, we won't lend or insure people, in that area at all. Like, we won't do it. Okay. So the next one, what is blockbusting? What is blockbusting? As I take one more sip of my drink, let's see. Is this the same as panic selling? Yes, blockbusting, panic peddling, or panic selling are the same thing. Yeah, scaring people to sell by stating a minority is moving in or moving out. That's basically what it is. So you're saying those people are moving in, those people are moving out, right? Those people are moving in, those people are moving out. That is the situation there in regards to what it is. You're saying to someone, hey, you better sell now before we get to a situation where you have where your home prices are affected. Typically it's religious organizations, religious groups are moving in, or even the ethnicity or the ancestry or the fabric of an area is changing. Like, I saw it a lot. I remember I invested in Brooklyn, New York, and I had properties in predominantly European areas where it was predominantly Italian, like literally every single house was Italian. And then all of a sudden it completely changed into certain parts of Brooklyn turned to Russian, turned to was more Asian dominated. And what happened was they were paying buku money to get into certain areas. And a lot of people did. The agents were coming to my door saying, hey, there's not a lot of Italians here anymore. You should be selling. And I was like, oh, dear God, you're blockbusting. Like, I knew what it was. I was like, you can't be saying that. You can't be saying that out loud. Like, it was true. But the agents and the people that were trying to convince someone to sell are not the ones that are supposed to be doing that. Now, let me ask you this question, so people that are with me live that can answer. So here's a test question. Ebony, this is a great one. Yeah, you do have your test question is a good one. Agent stops advertising in a popular newspaper because the house for sale is near a Jewish region. Is he able to only advertise in the Jewish newspaper if he doesn't mention a protected class? My answer is no. Okay. So what I will tell you is this: if the advertising is reduced or let me ask you this question, or more so, if it stops. Okay. So if it stops completely everywhere else, and you only advertise in a Jewish or ethnic or whatever region newspaper, no, that's not acceptable. That is discriminatory. But if you advertise, like I'll tell you something that I do all the time. I advertise, and if I know for a fact that this is something that, advertising at, a temple, a mosque, something like that might help get the word out, like, yeah, I'll definitely do that in addition to all my other stuff. So that was a good test question. Yes, that is on the that is something that comes up. And what I'll tell you too is this: go into my daily test questions, okay, my daily practice questions, because I actually answered that one maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago in there. So that is a great place, a great resource for you guys. And where you could do is you just go to playlists on my YouTube channel, and you'd be able to find it there in daily practice questions. And I put it also in my Facebook group. So that is, something that I would say to definitely look at, because a lot of the questions that you probably get on the test, and I know there's another question that is on the test that goes along the lines of this: which one is not a protected class? They'll say Jew, Arab, single mother, and a what else? A single mother and homosexual, right? So for federal law, homosexual is always not covered because it's not covered in any of them. But here's the thing: some of you guys might have questions where they might look at the state, or you might have state specific anti-discrimination laws. Okay, almost every state has a state level anti-discrimination law. And what happens with those, is they sometimes cover classes like homosexual, stuff like that, where they're protected. What I will tell you is this: what you have to read what the question is asking you. That's so important to do that, to read what the question is asking, because that could either lead you down the right path or the wrong path. So let's keep moving. Let's keep grooving. Okay, guys, that was fair housing. So if you guys have any other questions as I move along, let me know. Okay, now appraisals. Let's start with this question: what is an appraisal? So what is an appraisal? What would you say an appraisal is, guys? So I'll give you my definition of an appraisal. An appraisal is an analysis of data that leads to a estimate or opinion of value. That's it. By a licensed appraiser. It has to be by a licensed appraiser. Okay. So can a real estate agent who is not a licensed appraiser ever do an appraisal? No, never, ever, ever, ever. What could they do? What are some things that they can do though? Like, okay, let's say a licensee wants to give a valuation of a home. Like, they have to figure some things out. They, like, a seller said to him, "Hey, can you tell me how much my home is worth? Can you tell me how much my home is worth?" What would they do? What is it called? What would a licensed real estate agent or CMA they can do? Yeah, they could definitely do a CMA. So a broker or a salesperson is going to put a CMA together, or BPO. So what does the CMA stand for? What does the CMA stand for? Comparative market analysis. Yeah. So some people say comparative market analysis, some say competitive market analysis. Tomato, tomato. I think that they're the same thing to me, in my opinion. Okay. I think that everyone knows what it is. Okay. So what happens is this: the CMA basically is a more dynamic, in my opinion. This is what I'm going to tell you. A CMA, in some aspects, is more realistic as to what the value might be. because a CMA, the broker or the salesperson is not tied down to, they're not tied down to one particular way to come up with the value, right? They're not tied down to only looking at sold comparables, because what happens is this: in a appraisal, they're going to use the market data approach to appraise a residential property, okay, which is similar to a CMA, but they can only take into consideration, excuse me, they can only take into consideration the sold properties, okay? They can only take into consideration sold properties. So what happens is this, okay? What happens is, in regards to the CMA, what happens is they could actually take into consideration, they could take into consideration a lot more than just the sold comparables. So what they could take into consideration is they could take into consideration the active comparables, they could take into consideration the expired comparables, things of that nature, okay? So what happens is they could do a lot more. It's a little more dynamic. And to answer the question that just came in on the chat, which is, which of the following is not covered by the New Jersey law against discrimination? The answer to that is age. Age is not covered under the New Jersey law against discrimination. All the other ones, all the other ones are covered, okay? All the other ones are covered, okay? So marital status is the only one that isn't covered on a federal level. So I figured I'd answer that question because I had that off the top of my head. And the other question that came in is, what is a BPO? Okay, what is a BPO? So BPO stands for a broker price opinion. And what that is this. What that is basically a CMA that a bank or someone would pay for, okay? So it's like a compensated. So this was popular in 2008. 2008, what happened was this: we had the financial, crisis, we had, banks being bailed out, things like that. And what happened was banks were foreclosing on homes left and right from here to Timbuktu. And what the banks were doing was they were like, look, instead of ordering an appraisal for $500-600, maybe more, maybe sometimes $800, depending on the parts of the country. What happened was this, okay? What happened was the banks were paying for the broker price opinion, which was a CMA of sorts, and it was just basically a compensated CMA, and it's still done today. In certain reasons why they order a BPO is just that it's a lot cheaper, okay? And Linda asked, what are we going to use to determine the value of, if we're doing an appraisal? So let's say there's an appraisal, okay? So to answer, so if you're rewording the discrimination question, marital status, nationality, and sexual orientation are all covered as protected classes under the New Jersey law against discrimination. Age is not covered. So the age is the one that is not covered in the New Jersey law against discrimination. Okay. So let's go to the different approaches to value that an appraiser has to consider. And they have to consider all three of them, right? So they have to consider three approaches to value. So the first one that I'm going to use is the income approach, because that's what we would use for a 10-apartment building, okay? Because we would consider that commercial property. So this is typically commercial property, okay? And this is going to be a situation where any of your income producing commercial property is going to be using the income approach. So how they come up with the income approach is, the predominant way is the capitalization rate. And how that works is this: it is the income over the rate times the value, okay? So it is, so some people do IVR. I do Irv because I always say Uncle Irv wears a cap. So whenever you see a cap rate, I always think Uncle Irv right over here. Okay. Uncle Irv wears a cap. So basically what that formula means is this. The income divided by the rate equals value. The rate times the value, okay, equals income. And the income divided by value equals rate. All right. And for the math section on the capitalization rate, what I will tell you is I do a lot of cap rate problems in the YouTube channel. So you can go in and check out me going more into detail there about how an appraiser would use that, do that kind of thing, and what kind of income capitalization rate problems you might see on the test. Okay. Some of the things that you might see on the test. And what I will tell you is this. That is the situation there. So that being said, any questions on the income approach? Again, that's going to be our commercial properties or income producing properties, and they're going to typically use the cap rate, right? Typically going to use cap rate. There's also a gross rent multiplier, but not as common as a cap rate that an appraiser would use. So let's go to the next one, which is the cost approach. When would we use the cost approach to value? When would it, and when I say we, I'm saying someone who's appraising it, okay? Let's see. When will we use, it's the cost to replace a property, right? The cost to replace or reproduce, cost to reproduce or replace, what was I going to say? The cost to reproduce or replace a property. So what's the difference between reproduction and replacement? Let me ask you that. The cost to reproduce or replace a property. Kayla said, I don't know. So you ready? Reproduction is an exact replica. Okay. Reproduction is an exact replica. Reproduce it. Reproduction is an exact replica. Replacement is replacing it with the same utility. Okay. So if I had a single family home that was a ranch home, let's say a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch home. I'm just using this as an example, okay? Because residential properties, we're typically not going to use the cost approach, but I'm using this as an example. If it was built in the 60s, we're not going to use the reproduction cost because what happens is we're probably not going to use the same material, the same building methods, stuff like that. We're probably not even going to design it the same way. Probably is a little more choppy than we would design a home nowadays. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace it. We're going to replace it with a home that is a ranch style home, okay, but with current building methods, probably current layout of a floor plan. We're not going to go exact for exact, okay? So that would be a replacement cost, okay? If it was a newer home, a newer building, a newer structure, we probably would do a reproduction, okay? We probably do a reproduction in regards to that. So when would we use that? I think that's really the important question to ask. When would we use that? When would we use that? So this is going to be used mainly for special purpose buildings. And what do I mean by special purpose buildings? I mean schools, libraries, firehouses, police stations, things like that. The other time that we may use it, a church, right? Things that don't have an income and aren't going to have any sales data. So what happens is this. We would use this in all those scenarios where there's just not a lot of stuff to go by. Also, if it's brand new, like we're talking new, okay? Then what happens is this. We would definitely 1000% use a cost approach because there's probably not enough sales data to go by to use that. And what we do in a cost approach is we separate the land. So an appraiser would separate the land from the improvements on it. And on the improvements, they're going to apply depreciation. So what are the three types of depreciation that we could see on a property? What are the three types of depreciation? What are the three types of depreciation? And I'll help you out. You ready? One of them is physical deterioration. So, what is physical deterioration? What is physical deterioration? Wear and tear. Yeah, absolutely. 100, 1000%. It's wear and tear. Okay. Um, then, um, so this is the situation. So siding missing. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So wear and tear, siding missing, things like that. Okay. So that is the first thing. Okay. That's wear and tear, physical deterioration. The next one is functional obsolescence. Okay. Functional obsolescence. So, hot tub in the kitchen. That is not functional obsolescence. That is awesome. That is awesome. Okay. But yeah, a hot tub in the kitchen would be functionally obsolete. Yeah, that would be bad. Okay. 3 bedroom, 1 bath. I would say more so like a 4 bedroom, 1 bath. But yeah, I could see a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, nowadays in 2020, right? It should be at least 1.5 baths, in my opinion. Okay. So functional obsolescence basically means that there's and obsolescence comes from the root word of obsolete, like being obsolete. Okay. So if something is obsolete, then that would be situation there, right? So we're saying that, something would be functionally obsolete. So a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, hot tub in the kitchen, although we could argue that one a little bit. So yeah, absolutely. That would be a fantastic explanation of what that is. And what about economic obsolescence? What about economic obsolescence? What about economic obsolescence? Things outside the property. Yeah, things outside the property. Noisy factory, airport, train tracks. Yeah, great examples. Great examples. Yeah, things that are affecting it that are outside the property, that are economic conditions. Okay. So those are all excellent, fantastic, wonderful examples of economic obsolescence. So what happens is this: those are depreciation factors that are applied to the property, the actual building, but they wouldn't be applied to the value of the land. We never depreciate the land. So listen to what I'm going to tell you. We never depreciate the land in regards to the cost approach to value, okay? But can the value of land appreciate and depreciate? Could the value of land go up or down? Yeah, yeah, it certainly can. The value of land can go up or down, right? So what happens is this: we're basically not saying that the value of land is never going to change. It's never going to appreciate or depreciate. We're just simply saying when it comes to the cost approach, we're not going to apply any of our depreciation factors to it. Physical deterioration, functional obsolescence, or economic obsolescence. Because if we applied it to both the structure or the improvements and the land, we're basically double dipping on the depreciation, and that changes the value of the property. So that's why we say we never depreciate the land. Okay. When it comes to the cost approach, that's just not something we would do. Okay. So that is the cost approach. The last type of approach that an appraiser needs to consider is going to be that of the sales comparison, okay, or the market data approach. Okay. I wouldn't necessarily call it a CMA because they don't use that vernacular when an appraiser is doing it. Because although it looks, talks, walks, and acts like a CMA in many aspects to it, it simply isn't a CMA. It's part of an appraisal. So they would call it a sales comparison or the market data approach. Okay. Depending on what teacher you get or what instructor or what book you're reading out of, right? So that would be the situation there. Now, market data approach or the sales comparison approach, basically what happens is this: the appraiser takes the property, okay, And what they'll do is they'll compare it to known sales. They'll compare it to known sales. So they won't compare it to active homes, expired listings, things of that nature. They just won't do that. That's not something that's going to happen. But they will apply it to known sold homes. And let me ask you this. Do they adjust the subject property or they adjust the comparables? Do they adjust the subject property? They adjust the comparables. Okay. They always adjust the comparables, right? Because what happens is we don't know the price of the subject property. So how can we adjust it, right? So we're always comparing the comparable to the subject, saying, hey, is it superior or inferior to the subject? If it's superior, meaning it's better, then what happens is we're going to decrease the price. And the appraiser decreases the price or increases the price depending on what their opinion of that one factor is. So like, let's say it's one bedroom and the appraiser says, well, I think one bedroom in this area based on my analysis is $5,000. Then what happens is he's going to put a plus or minus of $5,000 depending on if it has an additional or is lacking a bedroom. Okay. And same thing for all of them. He's going to put his opinion in there, his thought process. And it's one of the reasons why you could have 5 appraisals on a property and get 5 different answers as far as that's concerned. Okay. So Linda said, where the value of the property is estimated by adding the appraiser's estimate of the replacement cost of the building to the estimated land and subtracting depreciation. So that is, so you're talking about replacement costs. So you're talking about the cost approach. So that is definitely the cost approach that you're referring to. Okay. So what they do is they subtract. So that's what they do. They take the land, right? And the land is actually found in the sales comparison approach. That's what they always use, the sales comparison approach for land. Okay. And what happens is this, the sales comparison or market data approach, this is used primarily for residential properties. Okay. For residential properties. But Linda, what you're describing is definitely 1000% the cost approach. Okay. And if you have any questions, let me know so that I could, try to answer them for you. Okay. As far as that's concerned. Now, let me ask you this. What is the final step that an appraiser is going to take in their appraisal process? What is the final step? What is the final step? In a narrative report, sure. It's in almost any report, it actually would be. The final step would be reconciliation. They were going to reconcile. What they do is this. They have to consider each of the 3 approaches to value. So they have to consider them. They don't have to use them. So typically what an appraiser is going to do is they're going to say, we were, appraising a property, a residential property for a home loan purposes, and we use the sales comparison approach, because that was the best available approach to us. The other 2 were considered but not used. So considering them and using them would be, would be the answer there. So they would definitely consider all 3, not use all 3. And the appraiser would reconcile the findings of the analysis of the data and come up with a singular one price for the property. That makes sense? Let me know if you have any other questions on appraisals, because if not, we're going to move on. We'll move on to some other topic. Let me know. Type in the chat. Let me know if you're like, oh man, that was good appraisals. That was good. As I take a sip. Yeah, and I'm losing my voice a little bit. You see, this is what happens with me. I wish that my voice held up, because then I could go longer. But I figured it out. 2 hours is like the cap. It's where my voice just starts going, and that's it. No more. No mas. So let's take a look, and let's go to. So we're going to cross 8 appraisals off of our list, and we're going to go to agency. So we're going to talk about the different types of agency, okay? Types of agency. So the first one that we're going to talk about is universal agency, okay? Then we're going to talk about general agency. Then we're going to talk about, excuse me, special agency. So who could give me an example of universal agency? What is an example of universal agency? What is that? What is an example of that? Anything? So universal agency is when you have universality over a principal or client. And here's what I'm going to tell you too. Agency, okay? Ebony said agency has the power to, so universal agency has the power to do it all. Yeah, absolutely. So what happens is this. When you are an agent for someone, that means that you represent them or work on behalf of them. Okay, so you represent or work on behalf of somebody. So when you say that I have universal agency over somebody, what you're basically saying is I control everything. Okay, I could go pick up their prescription drugs, I could sell their home, I could sign their name, I could make medical decisions for them, all that jazz. Like I have power of attorney, okay, over my grandparents. My grandparents are up there in age. They're in their 90s. They're in their 90s, okay? So what happens is this. The different types of agency, universal agency is when you have power of attorney over someone. You can make basically any decision for them or work on behalf of them in any capacity that you possibly want, okay? Next one is general agency. So what is an example of general agency? What is general agency? Kayla put property manager. Yeah, that's a great one. So basically what happens is this. You have, it's not that you have general tasks, it's that you have universality within a business aspect. So what happens is this. A property manager, let's say, Kayla, you were managing 123 Main Street for me. Okay? 123 Main Street was the property that you are managing for me. That means that if there was a water leak, if there was a vacancy, you would be able to take care of and manage all that. Okay? You would be able to take care and manage all that. Now, the situation is that you would have universality on 123 Main Street. Now, if I had to go pick up my dry cleaning, okay, all my suits were ready for the week, okay, would you be able to go pick up my dry cleaning? Unless I asked you to, you wouldn't be able to do that. If I said to you, hey, go pick up my prescription medication for me, nope, you don't have power of attorney over me, okay? You don't have that kind of thing. You can't do that. But you could do a lot of different things over at 123 Main Street. Now, if I had another property that was managed by someone else, let's say Ebony managed my other property, 456 Main Street, okay? What happens is if there's a water leak over 456 Main Street, you wouldn't even be responsible for that because you're 123 Main Street, okay? So what happens is you would stay within your bubble, okay, as Ebony would on her bubble, okay? So that is the situation there. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you're with me. If you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense, dude. Awesome. Then the last one is special agency. So what is special agency? What is that? Special agency is one specific task, okay? So I'll give you a perfect example. I I needed to buy out my car, and it literally was paperwork. It was just grueling, a horrible, evil paperwork at a car dealership. I had my admin, I sent my admin down to do that. I said, hey, admin, I'm going to give you power of attorney just for the task of, filling out the paperwork for my car. Okay? Sent my admin down there. I had an attorney fill out power of attorney. I called up the manager of the car dealership, told him what I was doing, and he was totally cool with it. I sent everything down ahead of time, and my admin took care of and did all of my paperwork for my car lease and my buyout. and I stayed in my office and worked. So that was a very effective use of my time, but that's an example of special agency. Another one is real estate agents. Yay, us. You know, we usually work in the realm of special agency. And how do we operate within the realm of special agency? Well, what happens is this: if we're representing a seller and we're procuring a buyer for the purchase of the property, okay, that's special agency. That's one task that we're set up to do. Now, if the buyer, okay, excuse me, not if the buyer, if the property, let's say all of a sudden pipes froze in the property and we had a leak. This happens all the time in cold areas, all the time. Pipes burst in a home that hasn't been properly winterized. What happens is this: is it my responsibility as the listing agent to hire someone to fix it? No, not at all, okay? It is not my job. I should tell the owner and I should let them know that it's their responsibility. That's your monkey, your circus, okay? You got to take care of that, Mr. Seller. But as far as what me, real estate agent Stu, has to do, nope, 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 and nope, nope. That is not my monkey, not my circus, okay? Old Polish proverb, okay? That is not my stuff. That is not for me to handle, okay? Does that make sense? Now, let me ask you this. Who is the client / principal? Who is the client or principal? Just who are they? Okay. So here's what I will say, okay? The one I'm giving fiduciary duties to. Oh my God, Kayla, that was a beautiful way to describe it. That's, get that. That bestills my little real estate instructor heart. The one you're giving your fiduciary duties to. Yeah, absolutely. It's the one that you hold near and dear to your heart. Gold star. Yeah, give yourself a gold star. And what I'll tell you is this, okay? It's a situation that I will tell you is the client or principal is always the one that you owe the full fiduciary duties to. So the fiduciary duties, what are the fiduciary duties? I always use the acronym ACCOLD, okay? And that is accounting, care, obedience, loyalty, confidentiality, okay? As I can't spell, I don't care. And disclosure. So depending on what your teacher is, where you've seen the stuff from, I'm sure you've seen cold AC, where they put the confidentiality outside of loyalty. I always say confident. Old car, yep, that's reasonable care is switched out for that. Basically, what you'll find is this: they're all the same. It's all the same stuff. We're just using different acronyms. I always use the cold because I always said, when you have a fiduciary relationship with your client, you're close enough to them that you can catch a cold. That's how I always remembered it. And here's the thing: some people say that the A is accountability. No, it's not accountability, it's accounting. Basically, that means that you owe the client or principal the ability to be able to handle money for them. Like to be able to account for where the money's going, that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's the situation there. So that is 110% the right idea as far as what the fiduciary responsibilities are. Okay. Now, what I will tell you is this. Okay. So you have a cold. Okay. And this is, so let me ask you this. What do we owe someone who is the customer? What do we owe the customer? That's what I wanted to get to. What do we owe the customer? Honest and fair dealing. That's usually how they word it. They word it as honest and fair dealing. Okay. And what that means is this: basically, you can't be underhanded. Also, some people sometimes say, oh, you owe them the disclosure of material facts. Yes, you owe them, if you know a material fact or a material defect, okay, or a latent defect, you have to tell the customer about that. So who is the customer? Who is the customer? So the customer is the third party, the other party, right? So if you're representing the buyer, it would be the seller. If you're representing the seller, it would be the buyer, okay? So you owe those people that kind of situation, all right? Now, each state is different, okay, as far as what they allow with how agents could interact with others in regards to dual agency, dual disclosed agency, stuff like that. Every state, though, has some sort of agency disclosure, okay? So when do you have to provide the agency disclosure to a client? Yeah, so depending on the state, some people say disclose 3 times here. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, there is you will never have a situation where you're disclosing too much, okay? So before any substantial conversation of real estate, before there's any conversation that has to do with real estate, they need to know how you intend to work with them and how you can work with them in your state, okay? That's basically what the agency disclosures are. So let me ask you this question as I wrap this section up. Do you have any questions, concerns for me on this? No? All right. Moving right along, okay? And I think we might be able to get through everything that we actually set forth to get through today. So let's talk about freehold estates. So what is a freehold estate? What do we mean by that? What is a freehold estate? Interest in property? Sure. And Kayla, let me just play devil's advocate for 2 seconds. Isn't a less than freehold estate also an estate interest in property? Right? So what's the difference? So how do I know what the difference between a freehold estate and a less than freehold estate? Because they're 2 different things, right? They're 2 different things. So how do I know? How do I know? Less or less E in a less than freehold estate. Okay. So here's what it is. A freehold estate, I always say a freehold estate is ownership. Okay. A freehold estate is ownership. There are 3 types of freehold estates. Okay. What are the 3 types of freehold estates that we could have? What are they? Anyone? So we have a life estate. Sure, we do have a life estate. What else do we have? So less than freehold estate is not going to be one of our freehold estates. Less than will not be one of the types of freehold estates because we're talking about ownership. Okay. So another one would be fee simple absolute. Okay. And fee defeasible. Yeah. So tell me what fee simple absolute is. What is fee simple absolute? And I'm going to write here while you're typing that into the chat. I'm going to put ownership. This is the full bundle of rights. So the full bundle of rights, I remember it as PUT because it's just one letter off from poutine, which is my favorite dish in the world. That's basically French fries with brown gravy and cheese. Okay. And that is the right to possess, use, transfer, exclude, and encumber. Okay, so you have the full bundle of rights when you have a freehold estate, right? Fee simple is 100% the most complete form of ownership, right? The only limitation to it is that of laws or the government powers. So the government powers are the only things that limit fee simple absolute. It is the highest form of ownership. So what's fee defeasible? What's fee defeasible? So can detour back to the original owner. Okay. So here's what I will tell you. Fee defeasible, and actually a lot of the times, here's the thing, guys, it's in the name. It's in the name of what it is. Okay. So fee defeasible basically is fee ownership that could be defeated. It's defeatable. So basically it is ownership based on conditions. Okay. Ownership that is based on conditions. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I give you a property. Let's say I give Kayla a property and I say, you can own this, Kayla, for as long as you do not sell alcohol here. Okay. I give you a commercial space and I say, as long as you don't sell alcohol here. The minute you sell alcohol there, that's it. Done. Dang nabbit. Yep. You can't do it anymore. Yeah. Can't do it anymore. Can't own that property. So it would revert back. Okay. So last one that we have here. What's a life estate? What is a life estate, guys? What is a life estate? What is a life estate? That is ownership that is based on the life of someone or something. So here's what I'm going to do. Yeah, so it's based on the life of someone or something. So let me kind of give you an example, because you guys always want the examples here, because here's a great one. If they just say, Bob gives Sally a life estate, the assumption is this. Upon Sally's death, it reverts to Bob. Okay? So if you just hear the words, Bob gives Sally a life estate, then what happens is upon Sally's death, it goes back to Bob. Now, you could also have a scenario where Bob gives Sally a life estate based on Chris's life. Then that means that as soon as Chris dies, the ownership reverts back to Bob. Okay. So when I'm saying revert, yeah, that's reversionary interest. So in each example, so what if Bob dies before or after? Like during the before, that interest goes to the reversionary interest goes to his heirs. So Bob's interest is Bob's interest. He can do whatever he wants with it. Okay. And here's the thing, I don't think you'll get a question like that on the test, like where they'll kill Bob off before that. But his interest could be willed, because there's no limits on that. Okay. Now, let me ask you this question. In the first example and the second example, let's say the person whose life it's based on, so Sally in the first one, Chris in the second one, let's say they're both alive. Can Sally lease the property? Can she lease the property? Yes, she can. Some people are saying yes. Yeah, she can. Yeah, she can. Can she lease the property? She can. Can she sell it? Why can't she sell it? Let me ask you that. Why can't she? She has possession, not ownership. Well, I just wrote up there that she has ownership. So this is ownership based on the life of someone or something. So if you're saying it's because she only has possession, that is incorrect. Just like, so if she's still alive, it's the life of Bob, correct? Nope, it's not based on Bob's life. And no, none of the examples I gave you is based on Bob's life. So in this situation, she has the right to sell that property to anyone she wants. She could encumber it. She could exclude people. She could do whatever she wants. She has ownership. Okay, that means she can sell it. But what she's selling is a life estate. She's selling her life estate because that's all she has. She doesn't have fee simple absolute ownership of the property. So what happens is, let's say Bob to Sally. So it's based on Sally's life, and then she leases it to Tim, or she sells it to Tim. Tim has ownership as long as Sally's alive. Now, here's the thing. What a lot of you guys think is this. You guys all go like this. Go, well, who the heck would want to do that? No, not a lot of people. Not a lot of people, right? Not a lot of people. Okay. That's the situation there. So in a practical sense, would this happen? Probably not. But could it? Yes. Okay. And here's the thing, the answers to the questions that I'm giving you, I'm saying, could they? Could they? The answer is yes. Now, let's say, I'm going to give you one last example. Let's say Bob gave Sally a life estate. Okay, let me just move my chat box. Bob gave Sally a life estate based on Richie's life. Okay. No, excuse me. Bob gave Sally a life estate, and upon Sally's death, it goes to Richie. What's Richie's interest in the property? Remainder. Yep. So every single one where it reverts back to Bob, okay? Every single one where it reverts back to Bob, Bob has a reversionary interest, okay? Bob has a reversionary interest, okay? When it comes to this example with Rich, okay, what happens is this. When it comes to Rich, okay, it will be a situation where he is a remainder man, okay? He is a remainder man, okay? So that is the situation there. So let's go to, and if you have any questions about any of this, let me know right now so that we could go over it before we go into encumbrances, easements, and that kind of thing, because we just did the Freehold Estates, okay? Just did the Freehold Estates. Okay. So now we're going to go to easements, and that's how we're going to wrap up tonight. I think that we've gone over a lot of different things. So let's talk about easements. So what is an easement? What is an easement? What is an easement? So an easement is a permanent right to use someone's property. So an encroachment would not be an example of an easement, okay? An encroachment would be an example of an encumbrance that is an illegal encumbrance, okay? That is where an improvement crosses over the property line. Yeah. That is where an improvement crosses over the property line, okay? So what I will tell you is this. An easement is a permanent right, so it runs with the property to use someone else's property. We have several different types of easement. An easement in gross, an easement by necessity, an easement by prescription, and an easement of pertinent. Okay. So what is an easement in gross? Can you guys tell me what an easement in gross is? What is that? So for business like meter reader, like stuff like that, the utility companies, right? So any utility companies that have utilities on your property, okay? Anybody that has utilities on their property, okay? That would be an example of, okay? That would be an example of a person that an easement in gross. And how I always remember it is this: power lines are gross to look at. Okay, Power lines are gross to look at. So that is something that I would say is a perfect example of an easement in gross. Power lines, utility companies, electric meters, stuff like that. What about an easement by necessity? What is an easement by necessity? Landlocked house, right? You need ingress, you need egress, right? You need ingress, you need egress, that kind of thing. Using a neighbor's driveway, yeah, if you needed to get in or out of your landlocked property, right? What about an easement by prescription? An easement by prescription. What is that? Easement by prescription means that you've met a prescriptive period of time with continuous open and hostile usage, right? You have met a prescriptive period of time. Each state varies a little bit on that sometimes, but typically it's like 30 years of open and hostile usage. And when we say open and hostile, we don't mean that you're sitting there, blaring a horn, getting a bullhorn and going, excuse me, I am using your property now. Ha ha. Okay. Just open, hostile, and notorious basically means that people know you're using it. Like it's apparent. Like you could be super nice to someone. Like I'll give you an example of one that I actually know of. Okay. That was by prescription. They were, a guy was using his neighbor's property to walk across to get to the lake behind the house to fish. He did it for like every day for like 20 something years. Okay. And then what happened was at the end of it, they sold it. Okay. And before they sold it, though, he met the prescriptive period, whatever it was. Okay. And he applied for an easement by prescription. Okay. Where they were like, yeah, we know that he uses that our parcel of land, that little strip, the 5-foot strip there to access the lake to go fishing every day. So the easement ran with the property then once he got it by prescriptive measures. Now, last and not, and certainly not least, what is an easement of pertinent? What is an easement of pertinent? Runs with the land. Yeah, so now here's the thing. All easements run with the land. But what happens is this. An easement of pertinent is one that we cannot classify as by prescription, in gross, or by necessity. So it's simply just a general easement, and that might be one in which there's situations where it was just voluntarily entered into, whatever the case may be. But that is the situation with what an easement of pertinent is. Now, let me ask you this question. You ready? Let me ask you this. What is the difference between an easement and a license to use a property? What is the difference between an easement and a license to use a property? So a license is given and may be revoked. Yeah. So what happens is this: like if my neighbor said to me, "Hey Stu, can I park my car in your driveway?" Sure, absolutely. You can park your car in my driveway. I don't have a problem with that. But then if my wife wakes up one day and goes, "What's the truck doing in the driveway?" I'd be like, "Oh, I let Casey, use the driveway." And then she'd be like, "Oh, no, 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 don't do that." I'd be like, "Okay." Like, and then I'll go over to my neighbor. I'll be like, My Mrs. Stu is kind of pissed. My wife is driving me nuts. You gotta take the car out of the driveway." That would be an example of a license where it differs from an easement. The easement runs with the property. Okay, the license does not. So, boys and girls, as I lose my voice towards the tail end of this, but we have a fantastic time, I'm going to end the recording here. Okay, so I'm going to hit stop recording.